Oh, look at that. Look at the shock on their faces. Look at the absolute disbelief dripping from their mouths like venom they can't swallow fast enough. They're stunned, frozen, completely blindsided by the fact that you got smart. No, no, no. Let's rewrite that pathetic little narrative they're clinging to right now. You didn't get smart. You didn't suddenly develop intelligence overnight like some kind of miracle they witnessed. You were always intelligent, always capable, always 10 steps ahead of the game they thought they were running. What happened, what really shook their fragile little world to its core, is that you stopped pretending. You stopped dumbing yourself down. You stopped shrinking your mind, your words, your brilliance to fit into the tiny, uncomfortable box they built for you. You stopped playing the fool for their comfort. And now they're absolutely losing their minds because the person they thought they had figured out, the person they underestimated, the person they dismissed as safe and predictable and controllable, just revealed that they've been playing chess while everyone else was still learning checkers. Let's get something brutally clear right from the start. These people, these so-called friends, colleagues, family members, whoever they are in your life, they needed you dumb. They needed you confused. They needed you second-guessing yourself, questioning your intelligence, doubting your instincts, running everything by them for validation. Why? Because your intelligence was a threat. Your clarity was dangerous. Your ability to see through their manipulations, their half-truths, their carefully constructed illusions that terrified them. So they conditioned you, slowly, subtly, strategically. They laughed at your ideas just a little too hard. They interrupted you just a little too often. They explained things you already understood as if you were a child. They made you feel like your thoughts needed translation, like your perspective needed correction, like your intelligence needed supervision. And you beautiful, adaptable creature, you learned to play small. You learned to hesitate before speaking. You learned to dumb down your vocabulary, simplify your concepts, shrink your brilliance into bite-sized pieces they could digest without choking on their own inadequacy. But something shifted, didn't it? Something inside you snapped, woke up, refused to stay quiet anymore. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was just the weight of pretending finally becoming heavier than the fear of their reaction. Whatever it was, you stopped performing. You stopped translating your intelligence into their limited language. You stopped waiting for permission to be brilliant. You stopped apologizing for knowing things, for being right, for seeing patterns they couldn't see, for connecting dots they didn't even know existed. You stopped dumbing down. And the moment you did, the moment you let your real intelligence shine without apology, without filtration, without dumbing it down for their fragile egos, they panicked. Because suddenly the script flipped. Suddenly they weren't the smart ones guiding you. Suddenly they were exposed as average, as intellectually lazy, as people who'd been coasting on your silence and using your dimmed light to make themselves look brighter. And now they're scrambling. Oh, they're scrambling hard. They're trying to figure out when you changed. They're looking for the moment, the event, the trigger that made you suddenly so smart. But there was no sudden. There was no transformation. There was only revelation. The revelation that you were done pretending, done protecting their egos at the expense of your own expansion, done playing dumb so they could play legend. They're shocked because they genuinely believed the character you played. They genuinely thought the dumbed-down version was the real you. They invested in that lie. They built their entire perception of you, their entire relationship dynamic with you, on the foundation that you were less intelligent, less aware, less capable than them. And now that foundation is crumbling, and they're falling, and they're looking for someone to blame. And of course, they're blaming you for changing, for acting different, for thinking you're better than everyone now. Because the alternative, the truth, that they never really knew you, that they underestimated you, that they were wrong about you from the beginning, that's too painful for their egos to process. So let them be shocked. Let them be confused. Let them spiral, trying to make sense of this new you that isn't new at all. Because while they're busy rewriting history, trying to pinpoint when you got smart, you're already miles ahead, operating on a frequency they can't even tune into, seeing realities they can't comprehend, building a life they can't access. You didn't get smart. You stopped playing dumb. And that's the difference that's about to change absolutely everything in your life. Because the energy you were wasting on pretending, that's yours now. The mental space you were using to shrink yourself, that's reclaimed. The power you were suppressing to make them comfortable, that's activated. And there's no going back. There's no unseeing what you've seen. There's no unlearning what you've remembered about yourself. You're done playing small, and they're going to have to deal with it. Let's talk about the mask. That carefully crafted, meticulously maintained mask of acceptable stupidity you wore for years. And yes, years. Because this wasn't a phase. This wasn't a bad week or a rough month. This was a sustained performance. A long-term role you played so convincingly that you almost forgot you were acting. You played confused when you understood perfectly. You asked questions you already knew the answers to. You let them explain concepts you'd mastered long before they discovered them. You nodded along to their mediocre insights as if they were profound revelations. You pretended their basic observations were brilliant. You acted like their surface-level thinking was deep. You laughed at jokes that weren't funny. You agreed with opinions you knew were wrong. You simplified your language, dumbed down your ideas, hid your vocabulary, suppressed your wit, contained your analysis, all so they could feel smart, all so they could feel superior, all so they could feel safe. And the mask fit so well, didn't it? You wore it so naturally that people forgot it was a mask at all. They thought that was your face. They thought that was who you were, limited, simple, easy to understand, easy to predict, easy to control. They built entire strategies around your perceived limitations. They made plans assuming you wouldn't notice. They had conversations assuming you wouldn't understand. They made decisions assuming you wouldn't question. They underestimated you so thoroughly, so completely, that they stopped hiding their true selves around you. They stopped being careful. They stopped watching their words. They stopped concealing their intentions. Because they genuinely believed you were too dumb to see through them, too simple to recognize manipulation, too naive to spot deception, too limited to connect the dots. And that was their fatal mistake. Because while they were busy underestimating you, you were busy learning everything about them, their patterns, their weaknesses, their fears, their strategies, their lies. You see, they thought your silence meant ignorance. They thought your questions meant confusion. They thought your patience meant stupidity. But you were never confused. You were collecting data. You were never ignorant. You were observing patterns. You were never stupid. You were playing the long game, gathering information, understanding dynamics, mapping relationships, identifying who was real and who was performing, who was loyal and who was waiting for an opportunity to betray. You let them think they were smarter. You let them think they were in control. You let them think they were teaching you, guiding you, protecting you from your own supposed limitations. And all the while, you were building an empire of understanding they couldn't see. You were becoming fluent in their language, while they never bothered to learn yours. You were studying their playbook while they assumed you couldn't read. You were 10 moves ahead while they thought you were struggling to keep up with the current move. But wearing that mask, that came at a cost, didn't it? It wasn't free. It wasn't easy. It required energy, constant energy, to suppress your real thoughts, to bite your tongue, to swallow your corrections, to watch them make mistakes you could prevent but weren't allowed to address. because addressing them would reveal that you knew better. It required discipline to play dumb consistently, to never slip up, to never accidentally reveal your true intelligence, to maintain the character even when it exhausted you, even when it insulted you, even when it suffocated you. It required sacrifice, the sacrifice of your authentic self, the sacrifice of genuine connection, the sacrifice of being truly known. Because how can anyone really know you when they're interacting with a performance? How can anyone truly love you when they're in love with a dumbed-down version you created for their comfort? They don't know you, they know the mask. And that loneliness, that deep, aching loneliness of being surrounded by people who think they know you, but have no idea who you really are, that's the price you paid. And for what? For their comfort, for their egos, for their sense of superiority, for peace, for approval, for acceptance, for belonging, for the illusion of connection, for the fear, the deep-rooted fear that if you showed up as your full intelligent self, they would reject you, abandon you, punish you, isolate you, make your life harder than it already was. So you dimmed your light, you shrunk your mind, you played the role, you wore the mask, until one day you couldn't anymore. Until one day the mask became heavier than the fear. Until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself, and you realized that protecting their comfort was destroying your soul. And that's when everything changed. That's when you took the mask off. That's when you stopped playing dumb. That's when they got shocked. Because they never expected you to stop performing. They never prepared for the possibility that you would choose yourself over their comfort. They never imagined you would reveal your real intelligence. And now they're reeling. And you're finally breathing. Here's what they don't want you to understand. Your intelligence was never the problem. Your intelligence was never lacking. Your intelligence was never something that needed to develop, to grow, to emerge over time. It was always there, sharp, precise, penetrating, dangerous. And they knew it. They felt it. They saw glimpses of it even through the mask you wore, and it terrified them. So they did what threatened people always do. They gaslit you. They made you doubt yourself. They made you question your own mind. They planted seeds of insecurity so deep that you started believing you were the dumb one, the confused one, the one who needed their guidance, their explanations, their corrections, their constant supervision over your thoughts. Remember when you shared an idea and they dismissed it immediately, only to present that exact same idea weeks later as their own brilliant insight? Remember when you pointed out a problem and they called you paranoid, negative, overthinking, only for that exact problem to explode later and suddenly they're acting like they knew it all along? Remember when you predicted an outcome and they laughed at you, mocked your analysis, called you dramatic, only for everything to unfold exactly as you said it would, and they conveniently forgot they ever doubted you? Remember when you questioned something that didn't make sense and they made you feel stupid for asking? Told you to just trust the process, just follow the plan, just stop overthinking, only for you to discover later that your instinct was right, that something was wrong, that you should have trusted yourself? That wasn't coincidence. That wasn't luck. That wasn't you being negative or paranoid or overthinking. That was your intelligence. That was your pattern recognition. That was your analytical mind seeing what they couldn't see or didn't want you to see. But they couldn't acknowledge that, could they? They couldn't validate your intelligence, because validating it would mean admitting their own limitations. It would mean sharing power. It would mean treating you as an equal, as someone whose thoughts mattered, whose insights were valuable, whose perspective deserved consideration, and they weren't willing to do that. So instead, they invalidated you. They made you feel crazy for trusting your instincts. They made you feel arrogant for believing your analysis. They made you feel paranoid for questioning inconsistencies. They made you feel stupid for not understanding things that didn't make sense because they weren't supposed to make sense. They were lies, and lies never make sense to an intelligent mind. Your intelligence detected the lies. Your intelligence recognized the manipulation. Your intelligence saw through the performance, and that made you dangerous. That made you a threat. That made you someone who needed to be controlled, dimmed, convinced that they were the smart ones, and you were just confused. And you believed them. You actually believed them for a while. You internalized their narrative. You started questioning your own thoughts before you even finished thinking them. You started second-guessing your instincts. You started running your ideas through their filter before trusting them. You started seeking their approval for your own thoughts, as if your thoughts needed external validation to be legitimate. You gave them authority over your mind, and that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted you dependent on their interpretation of reality. They wanted you reliant on their validation of your thoughts. They wanted you convinced that you couldn't trust yourself, that you needed them to help you understand the world, understand people, understand situations, understand yourself. Because as long as you didn't trust your own intelligence, they could control the narrative. They could shape your reality. They could keep you small, manageable, predictable, safe. But intelligence is stubborn. Intelligence doesn't stay buried forever. Intelligence pushes through. Intelligence finds cracks in the lies. Intelligence notices patterns in the manipulation. Intelligence starts asking questions that don't have good answers. Intelligence starts connecting dots that reveal uncomfortable truths. Intelligence starts seeing the whole picture, not just the carefully curated version they wanted you to see. And your intelligence never stopped working. Even when you tried to suppress it, even when you tried to dim it, even when you tried to doubt it, it kept processing, kept analyzing, kept collecting evidence, kept building a case, kept preparing for the moment you would finally be ready to trust it again. And when that moment came, when you finally stopped fighting your own mind and started listening to it, when you finally stopped doubting your intelligence and started honoring it, everything clicked. All the pieces fell into place. All the confusion cleared. All the gaslighting lost its power. And you saw them. You saw the manipulation. You saw the control. You saw the fear. You saw why they needed you dumb. Because your intelligence exposed their mediocrity, and they couldn't survive that exposure. So you stopped performing. You stopped playing the role. You stopped pretending to be less intelligent than you are. You stopped dumbing down your vocabulary. You stopped simplifying your ideas. You stopped asking questions you already knew the answers to. You stopped nodding along to nonsense. You stopped acting confused by things that were crystal clear. You stopped seeking their validation for your own thoughts. You stopped apologizing for being right. You stopped shrinking your mind to fit their limited capacity. You stopped translating your intelligence into language they could digest without feeling threatened. You stopped protecting their egos. You stopped carrying the burden of making them feel smart. You stopped playing dumb. And the moment you stopped, the moment you showed up as your authentic, intelligent self, the moment you let your real mind speak without filtration, without apology, without dumbing down, everything changed. They noticed immediately, didn't they? They felt the shift. They sensed the change. They recognized that something was different, that you were different, that the dynamic was different. Suddenly, you weren't asking for their opinion on everything. Suddenly, you weren't confused by concepts you'd clearly understood all along. Suddenly, you weren't impressed by their mediocre insights. Suddenly, you weren't laughing at their weak jokes. Suddenly, you weren't agreeing with their shallow analysis. Suddenly, you were speaking in full complexity. Suddenly, you were using vocabulary they had to look up. Suddenly, you were making connections they couldn't follow. Suddenly, you were seeing angles they couldn't see. Suddenly, you were challenging their narratives. Suddenly, you were correcting their mistakes. Suddenly, you were revealing depths of understanding they never knew you possessed. Suddenly, you were operating on a level they couldn't reach. And suddenly they realized they never really knew you at all. And that realization, that terrified them, because it meant they'd been wrong about you. It meant they'd underestimated you. It meant they'd misjudged you. It meant the entire relationship was built on a false foundation, on a character you played, on a dumbed-down version they mistook for reality. It meant they never had the power they thought they had. It meant they never had the control they assumed they had. It meant you were always smarter than them, always more aware than them, always more perceptive than them, and you just chose not to show it. Until now. Until you stopped choosing their comfort over your authenticity. Until you stopped protecting them from your intelligence. Until you stopped playing small. And now they're faced with a version of you they can't manipulate, can't control, can't predict, can't underestimate, can't handle. So they're reacting. Oh, they're reacting in every predictable way threatened people react when someone they underestimated reveals their true power. They're trying to rewrite history. You've changed. You're different now. You're not the person you used to be. As if the dumbed-down version was the real you, and this intelligent version is somehow fake. They're trying to make you doubt yourself. You're overthinking. You're being too analytical. You're making things complicated. As if intelligence is a flaw. As if clarity is a problem. As if understanding complexity is somehow wrong. They're trying to invalidate your intelligence. You think you're so smart now. You think you know everything. You think you're better than everyone. As if recognizing your own intelligence is arrogance. As if trusting your mind is ego. As if refusing to play dumb anymore is superiority. They're trying to isolate you. Nobody else thinks this way. Everyone else agrees with me. You're the only one who has a problem with this. As if consensus equals truth. As if popularity equals correctness. As if your unique perspective is wrong simply because it's unique. But you see through it now, don't you? You see exactly what they're doing. You recognize the manipulation. You understand the tactics. You see the fear behind the aggression. You see the insecurity behind the invalidation. You see the control attempt behind the gaslighting. Because your intelligence isn't dimmed anymore. Your intelligence is fully activated. Your intelligence is operating at full capacity. And their games don't work on you anymore. Their invalidation doesn't shake you anymore. Their gaslighting doesn't confuse you anymore. Their attempts to make you doubt yourself bounce off you now because you've remembered something crucial. You've remembered that your intelligence is legitimate. You've remembered that your thoughts are valid. You've remembered that your perspective is valuable. You've remembered that you don't need their validation. You've remembered that you don't need their approval. You've remembered that you don't need their permission to be intelligent. You've remembered who you really are. And there's no going back to pretending you don't.